we go. So yeah, as you said, my name is Andreas Moller. You can find my Twitter there at Colorfit. And I work for a company called Toddle. And the question that's sort of been plaguing my mind for the last many years now is, as we said, is the text editor really the best tool to create visual web apps? Because that is really the norm today, right? We have all sorts of fancy design tools for showing what the UI could look like. But when we actually come to implement it and build it, we're still back at coding, we're still back in a text editor, translating all our UI designs into text. And I think when you work as a developer, this can feel quite backwards. I think it's almost best expressed through this. This is one of our senior designers, and this is kind of what it feels like to be a software developer a lot of times. It's like, can you just do like pixel perfect, the same thing I just already built, but in code? And so the standard today really is that we build the same thing twice. We do it once in Figma to do all the bits, all the details of how it should work, and then we do the whole thing once more in code. And I mean, obviously that feels, when you're doing it, quite backwards. So the real idea is, what if we could eliminate that? What if we could redefine the roles in a team so that the designers aren't just drawing a picture of an application, but they're actually designing it. They're actually building the UI. They're actually designing not just the visual snapshots, but the UI behavior as well. We're like letting the UX designers actually design the UX. And so we sometimes say, what if every team member was a dev? What if everyone on your team could contribute directly to your application? So you have engineers are still there. They're doing all the heavy logic, all the complex interactions, etc. But your designers can actually implement their own design. And you can even have people like marketers going and change the copy directly, instead of having to do everything due a large set of Jira tickets, right? We don't have to create a Jira ticket for every little change. And I think most people in this room has probably been somehow involved in a Jira ticket that took longer to write than the thing it's supposed to fix would take to do, right? If it's like change the text on a button, that takes longer to write in Jira than it should take to do it in the actual product. So one thing I hear a lot when I talk about this is this reaction. Yeah, but I mean, we've seen that, right? Like that's just no code, right? And I think while there are similarities between what we built at Toddle and quite a lot of no-code tools, the focus is very different. No-code are a set of tools. If you're for some reason not familiar, I suggest you go and check out the stage behind, where there'll be a whole set of talks about no-code and different tools. But no-code is this idea of building tools specifically for people who aren't traditionally programmers and who don't work in product teams. And they're really cool. They let you build like applications in like hours that would normally take a lot longer. But they're not meant for professional product teams. They're not designed for people building a SaaS application. And they come with a natural set of limitations. That means that they never really went into the mainstream programming. They never really became part of a like professional product team's portfolio, right, or a tool set. And so what we want to do with Toddle is to start from the other side. Like, what does a professional team need? What is a tool that lets them actually build the kind of products they want to build without the limitation of what normal no-code tools come with, but still lets people at different skill levels and different sort of backgrounds actually contribute directly. Now, of course, visual programming, as you say, we already know about no-code. No-code is just the latest iteration of this idea of, can we make programming visual? The first one I know of is like from 1964, which is Grail. This is before most computers had screens. So you had to buy this $18,000 RAND tablet to actually do this. But this Grail programming language actually let you draw boxes and connections on it, and it would understand them and execute the actual underlying logic, right? And as you probably understand, you weren't building massive software systems in this, but this idea of like decoupling programming from code is really old. It's been tried a lot of times with varying degrees of success. But I think the idea, everybody kind of knows there's something there. How do we grab it is usually the hard part, right? So, when we came to design Toddle, there was kind of three things that we had that was absolute must. These were sort of the three pillars that had to be true, and then we could iterate on that. And one of them is it has to be flexible. Like, if I'm asking an engineer to switch to a new platform or new tool, they need to be able to do everything they can do in their current tool set. Like, we can't hamstring, we can't limit what you can build, because eventually you'll just grow out of that tool. That's not really what we want. That's not what your product team want, right? We don't ever want to go into a rewrite. Rewrites never end well, right? And the way we sort of usually say it is that anything you can build in something like React.js, you would also be able to build in Toddle, right? And that flexibility is a core principle that we don't ever want to compromise on. The next thing is collaboration. I think this is also occasionally overlooked, but the reality is that anything that you build that has success eventually scales not just in usage, but also in developers. So you need good, strong collaboration tools for being able to work multiple people on a tool on the same product at the same time. And we have this in code. It's called Git. It works really well. There's not a developer in the world that would ever start a product today without using a version control system, right? So this is one of those fundamental things that have to exist in order for us to actually replace code as a main way of programming. And the final one we have is speed. Like, if performance is bad of the tools you use, well, that's going to be the limit of what you can build in, right? So it's got to be very fast by default. It can't limit performance compared to traditional code as well. And our goal here is to say that anything that's built in Toddle has to be as fast or faster than what you would build in code. And so this is a lot of promises. This is a lot of big words about what we think a tool like this should do. So I'd like to show Toddle and show what it can do. I do have a handheld microphone, so I have to do it one-handed. That gets a little bit more interesting. But hopefully bear with me. So this here is the Toddle editor. If you've tried something like Webflow, which is a really great and very sort of professional-minded website designer, this probably looks very similar, right? Especially if we click here, we can see we've got like our element tree on the left, we've got our main canvas in the center, we've got our styling on the right. Even if you use something like Figma predominantly, this probably seems somewhat familiar, right? That's kind of the idea. And so I can see the resolution's a little bit tricky, so you kind of have to maybe catch the details at another point. But it'll still make sense, I promise. So today I want to build a really, really simple app, which is based on one of my favorite projects, which is the Owen Wilson WoW API. So someone built this. I actually don't know who built it. I should probably look that up. But it's an API where you can get clips from movies where Owen Wilson says, wow. And in this case, we have like a URL here. And if we open that, it'll just return some data here from a movie clip. And it'll get a random one, right? So I'm just going to copy this URL to our API and go into Toddle. And so this is the first thing where Toddle starts to differ a little bit from if you used website builders, because Toddle is all about building dynamic and fully functioning applications, right? So I want to go and add an API to Toddle, and I get a nice interface here for doing that. And I know you can't read the details of it, but this is the panel where we can go and add an API, and I can just paste this URL into our input field. And Toddle will automatically start fetching that data and have it available. In this case, it actually lists, in this case, the movie is Cars from 2000. And it got all this meta information about the movie. And we can scroll down and we can see there's some video information, and then we can get different resolutions here. I don't know if you can see that, but that's kind of why I'm reading it up, right? So now that we have the data in Toddle, we can actually start using that data in our design. So I'm going to go here and add a video element to my screen. Now, by default, we just load a placeholder video. But in any video element, and then Toddle is based on HTML. So if you've ever done any website building in your pastime, or actually maybe as a job, this should all look very familiar, right? So for the video element, I can specify what source the video should come from. And in Toddle, I can paste that in as a text here, but I can also use the little fx that says I want to use a formula. And that's basically saying the video source depends on some data in my application. In this case, data fetched from an API, right? So every time I load it, it's going to be slightly different. And I need you, Mr. Video Element, to automatically figure that out. So here I can use my formula editor. And I can say, rather than saying specifically what is the URL, I'm telling Toddle where do I find the URL. So actually, let's go and rename our, because it's a bit sloppy to not call it. We'll call it wow, right? We'll rename our API to wow. And then here on the source element, I'm going to go and pick our API, which pops up. And then that returns some data. I'll click on that. And we can see this is an array. We could have gotten multiple. In this case, we only got one, so we just picked the first one. And then all the way in the bottom, we saw that it had a video element, and then there was a 720p. I think we'll load that one. We're not going to test the Wi-Fi too much. And so as I'm doing that, as I'm building, Toddle automatically updates, because you're always working with live data. So as you're building logic, as you're building anything, as you're designing your UI, you always get to see what the actual result will look like, right? That's the final result of what you're building. You get to see, right? And now we can try to go into test mode.
Wow. Wow.
Right. Fantastic API. It has so many different uses, all very much centered around wow. So this is a very simple example, like it's a one-way. So let's add just a little bit more functionality right here. So I'll add another element, and I'll make it a button, right? And then in that button, I'll pick the text, and I'll say shuffle, right? And again, this is just editing content like you would do in any website build. There's not a lot of difference there. I think we look like a lot of tools in that sense. But with our button, we can now also go into our events tab here and say, I want to specify a behavior when I click this button. And in that click behavior, we get our second editor here, the workflow editor. And this is saying, what are the steps I need you to do when, or need my app to do when I click the button? And in this case, I wanted to call this API again. We essentially refetch the data. And so because this particular API generates a random example, it picks a random clip every time, whenever I press the shuffle button, it'll pick a new movie clip, and I can play it up.
Wow.
And so obviously this is a very simple example. I'm not going to spend the whole day building a complex solution here. But you can see how you can sort of use both the formula to display actually transform the logic of the data you have, as well as this actions to make your applications interactive, right? Now, I don't know if it's entirely clear from what I've built that I don't naturally belong in the design section of a conference. But maybe that does actually speak for itself, right? I'm not a designer by trade. I am very much an engineer. My co-founder, on the other hand, is a designer. And so what we often do is, if we have a particular tricky bit of UI or logic we need to do, I often end up building the initial version of it, and it'll often look exactly like this. And what he can then pick it up and actually just focus on the design. So this little benefit of not having to run every single design iteration through first the designer that builds in one tool, and then export either an image or like a set of style rules for a developer as a description for how they do their job, and then we essentially do the whole thing twice. We can bypass all this by simply having designer actually use the very same tool that I used to build this and implement all the logic. Well, he can then use to actually go and style it and design it. And it effectively makes us work twice as fast because we're not doing all the same work twice. Now, this is a very simple example of what you can build in Toddle. Like this is obviously not quite where the limit is, right? So I want to show some other examples of applications we built. This one is similar, simple, but a little bit more on the design front. So this is a weather app that uses a weather API to fetch the local weather from where you are. We can see right now it's 14 degrees with a few clouds. We're in Krakow, we can see the wind speed, all these things. This all comes from a weather service, right? And it actually picks a dynamic image based on the current weather and picks that out from, I think, Flickr in our case, right? Another good example, something I built, is what we call T-Beat, for Total Beat. So this is a beatbox. You can sort of punch in here your beats. And then you can sort of, as you play around with it, like build up more and more complex things, right? You get the idea. We can change the beats per minute. We can change the drum kit. And of course, we can copy the URL, share our beats with other people. You can go and try it out if you want. It's a t-beat.pro. And then just go and build your own beat, share it with people, play around with it, right? And again, this is entirely built in Toddle, right? Because we wanted to build a tool that's flexible enough that whatever the product you're building is, whether it's a beatbox or a traditional SaaS dashboard or a weather app or whatever it is you're building, like, I don't know, but if it's creative, almost if it's worth building, it doesn't look exactly like the last app, right? It's something new. The tool has to be able to handle that. One of the really cool projects one of our users built is this called ClickVoy. So this is one of our users in Malaysia that actually built like a very simple Shopify clone. Because it turns out that in Malaysia, Shopify actually isn't so great. There's a lot of limitations, especially around payment providers, etc. So he built his own very simple version of that, where you can spin up your own web shop. And this whole project is built in Toddle. So he has his customers build their web shop in his tool that he built in our tool. So it gets sort of a little bit, it can get a bit confusing there, right? But he can build something complex enough that you can actually build like a web shop editor in Toddle for your customers to build this, right? And I'm just looking at time, we're still good. The last project I want to show is, actually, I've already shown it. So the project I'm in here, building this Owen Wilson WOW app, is actually part of a bigger one. So right now I'm inside the Toddle project. So we use our own editor to build our own tool. So everything you've seen today, every single part of it, the logic editor, the style panels, everything we've used is built in Toddle, right? Because we wanted to know, mostly for ourselves, but also to show to everyone else, that we really mean it when we say, like, anything you want to build, you can build in this way. And it's not just that you can build it, it's actually a really, really good way to do it, because you work really, really fast. Now, please ignore, I'm glad you can't read this. This is an experiment we did internally with using AI for different features. In this case, it's an AI that notifies you that you have errors in your project. And we're not releasing this, I think, because I told it to be more and more rude the more errors you have. So in this case, I'll read it to you, but it says, "Listen up, you incompetent buffoon. You've managed to create a colossal disaster with 35 freaking issues in your so-called project," right? I don't think we're releasing this particular feature. I think we'll keep it internally for now. It was mostly an experiment, but it's just, that's why it pops all the time. It's we've managed only to release it to the internal team. So yeah, I mean, I'll show you another example. Right, so the actual formula editor where we do all the logic, like every single part of it, everything is a Toddle component built in Toddle, right? So we really mean it. Like, we really put our money where our mouth will, right? We really say this works. And we're a team spending all day, every day, building this product in itself, making sure that it can handle literally whatever people will want to throw at it, right? And the fact that we can do that with a relatively small team, we're actually only 8 people at the moment building this product. But the fact that our designers and our engineers are working side by side and collaborating rather than being part of like an assembly line of like doing each step all the time means that we can work at speeds that really wasn't possible in a traditional setup. That's all I had to show today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming and checking out what this is all about. You can check our website at toddle.dev. It's got a lot more examples of things people have built in Toddle. And you can sign up. You actually don't even need to sign up. If you want to try it, just click the button. It'll open the editor directly. And then you can go and sign up if you want to save your projects, etc. But if you just want to play around, just hit the button. It'll do everything for you. It's completely free as long as you're sharing what you're doing. And if you want to build private projects, obviously there's a paid plan. But you can go and start building in the open source version and build as much as you like. So yeah, please do that and please share what you build because we always like to see what people are building.
Let's appreciate Andreas with applause. We have an extra minute if you'd have 1 or maybe 2 questions. Okay, we got one.
Thank you. Hi, Andreas. We've met previously. My only question is, can we build the system, back office system, using this tool? So imagine we can create any kind of an item that can be just added to the list.
Sorry, I need that again.
Can we make a back office system having, let's say, the items you just place inside the list? So we can just create new elements inside existing system. So, I mean, if you got a list of, let's say, rewards or any kind of, let's say, items in the shop, and you can see this, like you see in a kind of CRM system, then you can just add it inside.
Yeah, so Toddle is only for building the front-end part of your application. Very often you see like a split between the back-end and front-end teams. So for actually, like you will need to pair it with a back-end and a database that Toddle can talk to. Most of those functionalities would be part of a back-end system. But Toddle can handle everything of the front end of what you described. Like that's very well within what we can do with it, right?